Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are. Welcome to Ancient Mysteries Unearthed Fireside Chat, the podcast where we explore the most intriguing locations around the world, from lost civilizations to buried treasures. Our journey takes us to the most remote corners of the earth to unravel the secrets of our past. So come join us as we look through all the beautiful, beautiful conspiracies and alternative knowledge of the onion that is the layers of the earth. So, how are we doing today?
Doing great, Brandon. Thanks so much as always, and welcome audience to this episode of the Fireside Chats podcast. We got a good one for you today.
Yeah, Chris, I think we're looking into the Coral Castle in Florida, in the continental United States there.
Yeah, it's we're going to look at North America. We're going to look, usually we're looking at other places around the world, and the funny thing about Coral Castle is that it's this total mystery from the early 1900s. We're going to get into it, of course, of one man who basically builds what we would call, a modern day amusement park built out of extremely heavy limestone, and it's a mystery, and it's a mystery that's similar to things like the pyramids of Giza. How on earth did they build and move such megalithic stone? And he, of course, the builder of Coral Castle, which his name is it Ed Leedskalnin? I always forget his last name and how to pronounce. His last name, but this is one man. We're going to find out more about him really soon. This is one man who weighs about 100 pounds and is maybe 5'6", small guy, and he's moving blocks that are 9 to 10 tons each. And throughout his entire life, it's a complete mystery as to how he's moving these things, cutting them, carving them, and built an entire, what we now call a castle, Coral Castle. And to this day, it's a mystery as how he did it. And that's what we're going to dive into today.
Well, I don't know too much about this anomaly, we'll call it, but I do know a few things from listening to the great George Norrie and Coast to Coast, and I remember kind of the tidbits that were really highlighted were that no one really saw him build it, save for a child, and we'll get into that child's account of it in a bit. But the whole thing was the community around him. This was usually built, it seemed like, at night or away from prying eyes, and that the progress was significant. Every time people would walk by, there was more of this, monolithic construction being built, and no one saw it. So, isn't that an interesting thing? And yes, and he was very secretive about how he accomplished such a great feat. So let's get right into it, Chris. I want you to dazzle us all with this amazing anomaly in American history, which is so cool because this is truly modern, really.
It really is. And so the gentleman's name is Edward Leedskalnin. And he came all the way over. We're going to get a bit of his backstory, but we're also going to get right into the incredible technology and all the mysteries surrounding this. But he came over to America from, I believe it was, I think it was Croatia. Now I'm also forgetting exactly where he came from. Somewhere from Eastern Europe, and really had nothing with him. And a family took him in Florida, and then he basically went on a search to find the perfect piece of land for this idea that he wanted to create, which is now known as Coral Castle. And the reason he would always give for creating it was for when he reunites with his Sweet 16. And it was just this mystery of this mysterious, people would assume was a woman that he was waiting for. She never ever came to his dying days. This woman never appeared, yet he built one incredible structure with many structures within it for this Sweet 16. That was always his motive. And when they asked him every single time, how did you do it? How are you doing it? He would just smile and usually not even answer at all, or at times he would say, I'm using the technology that the ancient Egyptians used. So let's dive into what that is. The first thing I want to go into today is a documentary hosted by Leonard Nimoy from, I think, back in the 1980s. And I actually really liked this documentary. Of course, that will be in the show notes below. You guys can check out the full length. We're going to watch a decent chunk of it today. I'm going to skip ahead from a couple of parts that go into, Ed's backstory, which I think is interesting but not pertinent to this podcast today, because I really want to go into the technology, which is the real mind-blowing stuff. But what I like about it is that this is like a mainstream documentary from the 80s hosted by Leonard Nimoy. And they already go into some of the theories which they think are telekinesis and anti-gravity is what he was using to move these things. So let's dive into what their hypotheses are and just this really interesting documentary that, of course, will be available in the show notes for you to check out.
In Search Of has investigated the mystery of many ancient monuments, the pyramids, Stonehenge, and Easter Island. A solution to these puzzles may be concealed in Florida's Coral Castle. This monumental structure was created by one man with his bare hands in the 20th century.
So we're going to get right into this, but I want you to notice, so for the listening audience, what we're seeing right now is this big stone doorway that twists. It rotates in the center of it like a revolving door that you go into an office building, except it's a big chunk of limestone. And we have another video that goes into just how insane just that construction alone is. This doorway is really incredible how one man could have put this together. It's 9-ton stone that rotates effortlessly.
Yeah, it looks like it's almost levitating. It's so smooth in its rotation.
Yeah, so we're going to get into those details. I just wanted to point that out as one thing right off the bat that's a smoking gun for some lost technology here is how in the hell did one man build this doorway in and of itself? So anyway, keep them going here.
What strange forces created this castle of secrets? Coral Castle has been called the eighth wonder of the world. This place is a fantasy garden and an engineering marvel. The blocks are cut and set with great precision, locked without mortar. At 30 tons, the greatest single stone in Coral Castle is twice as massive as any in the pyramids. Here are massive megaliths, huge astrological symbols, and structures whose purpose is a total mystery. Surprisingly, 25 miles away is cosmopolitan Miami. Coral Castle was built not in ancient times, but in the 20th century. Most curious of all, Coral Castle was built in secret by one man, Edward Leedskalnin, a frail little hermit. With no modern machinery and with no help, he somehow hand-carved and lifted every single block, a total of 3 million pounds. With all our modern technology, we might be able to duplicate the pyramids. But how could we ever do it with our bare hands? Dreamers beyond the fringe of science have postulated a long-lost art of harnessing anti-gravity. It seems incredible, but Ed Leedskalnin may have rediscovered these ancient secrets. Let's look at his life story.
Okay, so we're going to skip his life story for now. I recommend you guys watching and listening, watch this documentary. It's in the show notes. We're going to skip ahead. It's interesting stuff, but I want to get right to the technology and be mindful of our time right now. We're going to skip ahead to when Ed was looking for land to build Coral Castle. And it's really interesting how people would give him really good fertile farmland and beautiful land. He's like, nope, I'll know the right place when I visit it. And he ends up choosing something that's not great farming land. It was very undesirable, yet for him it was perfect. And we can maybe start to have a hypothesis as to why he chose this kind of land, and we'll get into that. So just wanted to give you some background there, and we'll skip ahead to roughly when he finds that land.
The backcountry. Crazy Ed and his rusty bike became the butt of many local jokes. Neighbors, watching him prod the ground, began rumors that he was hunting for buried treasure. Ed always rejected the good farmland. When people wondered why, he only smiled. Finally, he excitedly brought Moser to a remote plot. Moser was astounded, for Ed had unerringly located the worst acre in the state. It was all bedrock, right up to the surface. You couldn't plow it, you couldn't farm it. Moser gladly gave a small section to his friend. A few weeks later, Moser's curiosity got the better of him. He dragged his wife out through the brush to see what Ed could possibly do with that land. They couldn't believe their eyes. Ed had somehow cut a 10-ton block of solid coral right out of the bedrock and hoisted it into the air. As they nervously approached his flimsy tripod and the block which could crush them in an instant, they realized there was something more than craziness in Ed. How did he do it? Ed smiled and said, "It's not difficult, really. The secret is in knowing how." Why did he do it? He smiled again. "Someday, my sweet 16 will come." Working alone, he cut more blocks. All the locals had to visit and gape at this accomplishment. Ed was friendly, but firm. He would never tell his secret techniques, and he would always stop work when people came near. Trying to catch him at work, the neighbors took to spying. Some people swear they saw the rocks move. Ed could somehow sense their inquiring gaze. He would simply stop working and patiently wait until they gave up trying to discover his secrets.
So again, it's just interesting how he has almost like a sixth sense for when people were watching him. And from what I get, and there's interviews with people who actually knew him in this documentary, which are interesting, nothing too crazy that comes out of it, but it's just nice to, hear from people that know him. And again, very nice man. He's always very kind, but never, ever, ever, ever gave this information away. Or if he did, it's a mystery to that person hasn't obviously come forward with that information. And so he just had a sixth sense when anyone was watching him. And there was a couple of people that may have caught him doing what he was doing, but it just became rumor, legend, folklore, etc. And we'll get into one of the pieces of folklore that some kids saw from him and why that piece of folklore is very significant. We'll get into that a little bit later, but right now we're going to skip ahead. So what happened was Ed was actually robbed, and some people came into Coral Castle after he had built it and beat him up. And so he literally decided to move the entire castle structure to a new location that he felt safer in. And that in of itself was an incredible feat, because he had hired a guy with a truck and then told the truck driver that he couldn't watch him load the truck. So the truck driver would get out, go somewhere else where he couldn't see, and then Ed would somehow load these 6 to 9, 10-ton blocks onto the truck all by himself, and then the truck driver would come back and then drive him away. So we're going to kind of pick up the story from around that point, which is also an insane feat.
I wonder why he was so secretive.
The only thing I can think of is he was so aware of what this technology could do in the wrong hands, and maybe felt that, I've heard this before, where certain people who do have access to incredible knowledge, they recognize that in the wrong hands, it really could, be used quite negatively, and they'd rather just not have it come out at all. I don't know. That's the reasoning that I would guess for him. What do you think?
Yeah, I don't know. if it came out, I mean, it's kind of like if you were, like think of E.T. the alien, and this kid has this alien, and it's so great as long as he doesn't tell anyone, because if people know, then oftentimes, like, you end up getting in trouble or getting dissected. So I wonder if
Hmm.
he would be labeled as like a warlock, or he would lose his freedoms due to the knowledge that he has, perhaps.
Exactly. Like the military would probably want it very, very soon, right? So,
Right. So, I mean, maybe it would be for the better, or maybe it would be for the worse for him. However, it would be a intense experience, I'm sure, if you
yeah.
shared the knowledge.
Oh, yeah. So I can understand. So anyway, we're gonna pick it up from as he is. How on earth did this guy move the entire castle to a new location? So we'll start around there.
He lifted the giant rocks, which weighed up to 30 tons apiece. Rock 10 miles to its present location near Homestead, Florida. As usual, no one ever managed to see how he lifted the giant rocks, which weighed up to 30 tons apiece. How did he do it? There are many theories. 60 million years ago, this was all of South Florida. Thousands of miles of living coral reef. The rock which he used, fossil coral, may have internal forces which only Ed understood. A huge brain coral seems almost conscious, perhaps contemplating ancient secrets. Living coral.
So one of these theories that we're looking at is the actual coral itself. And he specifically, remember, was looking for a location so particular, didn't want fertile land. He actually wanted, what he chose was a place with bedrock that was basically coral bedrock that was almost out right up to the ground, where he cut from within the ground all this bedrock, which he then used to build Coral Castle. So maybe there is something. Why would he have chosen such a specific location with that specific type of bedrock and coral, coral type of bedrock? Maybe there is something to that, right? One thing to consider. There's other theories, of course, that we'll find out in a sec.
Coral constructs its own undersea castles. Forces deep in the earth fuse dead coral into oolite, a dense, strong organic rock. And most of South Florida has little topsoil over this bedrock. We asked the men at a rock quarry to try an experiment, to cut and lift a giant block of oolite. With diamond-tipped power saws, the cutting alone took several hours. The only way to break the block free, brute force. Then the test. Could they detect any unusual buoyancy in the rock itself? Using a 600 horsepower crane, could they lift the rock?
That tractor is struggling.
After the crane almost tipped over, they managed to drag the block a few yards. What modern equipment would it take to duplicate Coral Castle?
It couldn't be done.
Charles Valois comments.
Not with the modern equipment. I wouldn't cut more than 4 foot long and 32 inches wide and 7 or 8 foot long. That's the most I'll cut. And you see the struggle I have getting it out with that machine.
So once again, how in the hell did they do it?
Well, so Chris, this was in the 1920s to the 1950s that he was doing all this cutting and moving of these blocks, right? So
Yeah.
if if that technology then was struggling, right? And in search of his what in the 70s or 80s, this program that we're
80s.
watching right now,
Yeah.
right? So 1980s, I mean, we're talking over 50 years from the time he was starting to move this. And if you were in remote areas of Florida too in the early 1920s, we saw a Model T in their reconstruction of like their repurposing of the scene with the actors. They pull up in a Model T car, so you don't have access to these modern equipment uh, advantages anyways,
No,
right? So
no. They use
that's out of the question,
diamond tip tools again.
right?
Like, come on.
And this guy is working alone in the field and accomplishing this, and this is the same theme that I keep seeing again and again. Are people, we want to put a modern day spin on a prehistoric technology, right? And say like, oh, they did it then with this, but
Hmm.
we never really do focus on the fact that we can't do it now today with
Exactly.
everything we have. And that's really where, I hear people being like, oh, I just found out how they built the pyramids. They used boats. And I'm like, oh, they use boats. They're like, yeah, they loaded the rocks onto boats. And I'm like, right, but that's still sure. Maybe they did use some boats to move some blocks, but that doesn't account for the cutting and the lifting and the precision and the no mortar. And then you put in the math. And it's the same thing here in Coral Castle. How
And
did he do this?
when you hear the gentleman just before, like, who was in the tractor trying to pull this thing up, and um, you know, it's like he's like, we would cut way smaller bits. And that's the thing, it's like you got to understand, like, time, energy, money, all these things do need to come into account when you look at these structures. You don't build something in an extremely difficult way when you could build it in an easier way, cheaper way, more efficient way, right? Like, you wouldn't do that to yourself. So when they're building with these megalithic blocks in Egypt, or how Ed's doing it here in Florida, you do it because it's easy. There's something that you have figured out that makes cutting and moving those blocks pretty simple, like levitating them, for example. But cutting them, again, not sure how he's doing that, but we're gonna go into some more theories as to what that was, what's going on there.
This is the only known photo of Ed apparently working. Although he seems to be breaking the block free with wedges, a close look reveals that the block is already cut free, with a cable underneath. Engineers have been puzzled by this photo. Bruce Cathy has extensively studied and written on Earth forces. He believes that a harmonic grid inside the Earth's surface can create actual anti-gravity at certain nodes on the grid, and that Coral Castle was built on a position of harmonic resonance.
He's moved stones up to, or coral blocks up to 25 tons, and he'd put them up overnight just on his own. After he died, I checked some of the instruments he was using, and they're very, very primitive. Chisels and hammers and ropes and pulleys and things. Nobody can understand even today now how he done this. I found when I applied the harmonic mathematical basis to his position on the Earth's surface geometrically, that the same harmonic values popped up on the area where he was. He always said that he had the secrets of anti-gravity and magnetic fields, and he also said that he knew how they built the pyramids. So it appears if he was telling the truth, that it looks like he did have these secrets.
So isn't that interesting? Yeah, we're getting into it. This is really what we're getting into, is the technology that's been lost from, I believe, ancient times. Most of these pyramids and incredible structures we're seeing all around the world were likely built the way that Ed Leedskalnin built Coral Castle. This is the cool thing about Coral Castle. Not only is it a fun mystery in Florida, of all places, but it gives us insight into this lost knowledge, which clearly isn't fully lost. Like, you get people like Tesla, who is building, Wardenclyffe Tower, modeling it after the Great Pyramid of Giza, and then you got Edward Leedskalnin building Coral Castle and saying he knew the secrets of the pyramids. So there's a connection, and there's definitely, it's not a fully lost technique in science. That's what's really interesting, is it still permeates with select people that are clearly quite secretive about it.
Yeah, I wonder where they're getting this information from. I know I've a lot of geniuses and people who are so leading edge in their fields talk about almost um, the knowledge coming to them, not so much that they discovered it, but almost like
Yep.
it's been downloaded into them from like the ether of the universe. And I wonder, where would you get this information? The Coral Castle builder himself, where did he get this information from? It's 1920 when he starts this. He knows exactly what he's looking for. He goes to this site. As they're saying, it looks like it's on a ley line, much like all the other ancient sites. They're all
Yeah.
on ley lines. If you actually look at the earth and see where it's all connected, most of the time they're on ley lines. You can connect them by drawing circles. It's really crazy how it almost maps it out. So if it's on a ley line, then that seems to be one of the ingredients to be like, oh, hey, if you're on this area on the earth with this energy converging, you can access this technology. Very interesting stuff. And it's just there's so many questions you have that get left unanswered, except for the beauty of it all is that his work remains.
Yeah. Just
It's
like the
there.
pyramids.
Right.
It's going to stay for a long time because they build in rock and stone. And that stuff lasts a lot longer than metal and plastic and concrete, you know?
Right. Well,
So,
plastic lasts, it just breaks down into microparticles.
yeah. And it's great. And then we eat it later. It's fantastic.
Yeah. Gotta love pork.
Well, they say too, right? Paleontologists, anthropologists, archaeologists in the future, let's say 5,000 years in the future, will name our time period in history as the plastic period, right? We got the
Well,
Stone
makes
Age,
sense.
you got the Stone Age, you got the Bronze Age, and then we're the Plastic Age, which I'm like, it's not as poetic as I would like, but hey,
Oof. And
right?
they're
I
gonna
know
like
that's
talk about our like theorize what our oceans looked like,
oh
and
god,
they might
it's
like if only
embarrassing.
they really knew. Go for a swim in the ocean. Oy.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
many beaches. I remember the first time I went to like a sandy beach in the Bahamas that was on the ocean side, not on the continent side, and I was shocked at how I'm like, if you were stranded on a desert island today, you'd have at least some resources available to you because it's a garbage dump. So
Just use the plastic. It's all good.
yeah, rope and plastic and hockey sticks. It's fine. Somehow there's always hockey sticks. So
Of
getting
course.
back to
So
this,
we've got go
yeah.
ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say, where are we going next with this amazing anomaly here?
So we got two more really amazing videos, and they're a little long, so we're gonna just buzz through those. Basically, the next one we got is from a really great YouTube channel and creator called Praveen Mohan. His stuff is so good that it got canceled off of YouTube a couple of times, so he's on the edge. And he's got really great content. I highly recommend. He's going to, of course, be in the show notes, and his content's really good when it comes to a lot of things. Ancient America and also ancient India are his specialties. But today he's going to show us this doorway that we talked about at the very beginning of the episode, this 9-ton block doorway, and how even diving into the mysteries of it and some of his theories as to what's going on with this doorway, because it's just an interesting example of one of the many things within Coral Castle. And then we're going to go into some really cool stuff about more into the technology of what Ed was probably using. So let's get into this door situation here with Praveen Mohan.
Hey guys, we are at Coral Castle in Florida, and let's take a look at the most mysterious structure in the castle called the 9-ton gate.
I thought
This
this guy was me
8-foot
for a
tall
second.
revolving gate has not only baffled common people, but has also challenged modern day engineers. By the end of this video, I hope you will agree with me that this gate could not have been built by a single man unless he knew some kind of a strange ancient technology. The 9-ton gate no longer works, but here is a smaller 3-ton gate which still works. Edward Leedskalnin considered the 9-ton gate as a masterpiece and named this place after this gate, so the original name of Coral Castle was Rockgate Park. Ironically, the door did not get much attention from experts before it stopped working in 1986, so the owner initially calls a local construction crew, and they take a good look at this gate and tell them that they have no idea how to fix it. Now, the owner decides to call the quote-unquote educated engineers and calls the University of Florida. They send in a team of 6 engineers and they arrive with plenty of modern equipment, including a 20-ton crane. Now, keep in mind, Ed did not use any modern equipment and built this door without anyone's help. When the engineers took the door down, they saw that Ed had not only modified simple car parts like axle shaft and ball bearings of a 1918 Ford truck, but had also used a strange circular stone at the bottom. The engineers couldn't understand how this frisbee-sized rock could withstand 9 tons of weight. So they sent it to the geology department in the University of Florida. Guess what happened? A month later, the expert geologists simply returned the rock to Coral Castle and told the owner, "Hey, we have compared this rock with almost all other types of rocks on this planet, and we have even compared it with meteorites, but we cannot determine the origin of this rock." So, where did this rock come from? How did a man with a 4th grade education who rode nothing more than a bike get a hold of this rock? Anyways, the engineers put the gate back with new shaft and new bearings, but removed the rock because they were the experts and they could do better than the uneducated Ed Leedskalnin. You know what happened? It got stuck and did not move. Believe it or not, they had to shave the rock down to make it work. This just proves that 6 experts with all their modern techniques could not duplicate what Ed had done single-handedly without modern equipment or techniques. Now, the original door, which lasted from 1936 to 1986, could be moved by an 8-year-old girl with 1 finger. After 1986, it was not that easy, but a grown man could move the door with 1 hand. But it only lasted until 2004, and then it ceased. At that time, 3 different teams of engineers looked at it and basically said, "Leave it alone, it could crack open like an egg." Why? Because this rock is made of honeycomb coral, which is very brittle, and it will break if you give a strong tap with a hammer. How could Ed quarry and cut this huge stone without breaking it? And how could Ed drill a hole exactly through the center of balance, even though this rock is not a perfect rectangle? Now, he claimed that he could build Coral Castle because he knew the secret behind the construction of the Great Pyramid. Strabo, a Greek geographer, found a similar revolving door in the Pyramid of Giza. He has documented that in 24 BC, while exploring the pyramid, he stumbled on a large rectangular door made of rock. He mentions that this door leads to a long, narrow passage, and when the door is shut, it is so perfect that it seems like any other rock in the pyramid. Today, experts are still searching for this door. This raises the question if Ed really knew the secret behind the Pyramid of Giza. Is that why he was able to build a similar door in Coral Castle? Finally, there are many people who claim that Ed was simply a con man and a pseudo-scientist. Here we have a pseudo-scientist who could quarry, cut, and put in place a 9-ton door without anyone's help or modern technology. And we have the real scientists who come in as a team and with all their modern equipment and scientific calculations cannot duplicate what a pseudoscientist created. So you tell me who the real scientist is and who should be labeled as pseudoscientists.
Okay, so pretty incredible what's going on with that door. And, I really don't know. I mean, basically, audience, beautiful audience watching and listening, let us know in the comments, like what kind of technology you think is at play here. I'm going to be playing the last video here in the last part of the episode is going to be a video with Michael Tellinger going into what I think is a potential technology that was used in Coral Castle. And the reason why is because there's this piece of folklore where these two kids saw Ed when he was moving some of these megalithic blocks. He was using what they called at the time ice cream cones. And of course, anyone's going to hear a kid say, oh, I saw this guy levitating. They saw him levitating these rocks with ice cream cones and then putting them into a truck. Anyone that hears that, of course, is going to go, yeah, that's a great story, honey. Run along now, go play with your friends. They would never think twice of that. But Michael Tellinger was doing some research into cone-shaped technology and how it focuses in frequencies and sound, especially depending on the type of, he's looking at rocks and stones that were shaped in these cone shapes. And he goes down this whole rabbit hole of cone-shaped technology and how the geometric shape of a cone can focus in some aspects of energy, maybe also tapping into the energy of the ether that makes up everything around us. We did an episode, our last episode on the Lost Empire of Tartaria, and they, it seemed that there was a similar technology where they used the cone-shaped buildings, like the tops of churches and other buildings that are shaped in cones with a rod at the top to potentially extract energy from the ionosphere of the planet. So there's something about cone shapes that's got something maybe to do with what he was perhaps using to move these stones. So I'm going to pull up a video. Brandon, I don't know if you have anything you want to comment on with that last video there, but pretty crazy stuff.
I just think it's incredible, just the talking about the coral being brittle, and just seeing the actual door rotate effortlessly. And then now that it's seized, I wonder if that's just it sinking slowly over time, something that perhaps the builder himself could have easily corrected using his ice cream cones.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it is truly amazing. And just seeing the scope of it, there was some different shots there with all the stairs and everything that he's carved into the rock. And just the carving alone of such a structure is so amazing. That's putting aside the fact that he is built and stacked in a Stonehenge-like way, this whole building. So very interesting stuff. And I remember hearing about the kids talk about the ice cream cones and moving it into place from the Coast to Coast episode back in the day. And I'm very interested to see what Michael has to say about it. So let's get right into that.
We'll get right into it. And I just want to also say, like, this is just scratching the surface, of Coral Castle. Like you mentioned, Brandon, there's so much in this castle, and Pravi Mohan's got like about 7 or 8 videos on all these other parts within the park, like a really weird well that has a stairway leading into the water, which makes no sense. Of course, there's, I'm sure, something behind it we just don't understand. There are these astronomical, like moon-shaped and planet-shaped, huge megalithic like statues that actually do align to specific constellations. So like a lot of these ancient sites, Ed's also doing astronomical alignments in Coral Castle. So there's alignments to the cosmos, there's alignments to solstices and equinoxes, I believe, as well. And he even has a sun calendar in Coral Castle as well. So there's a lot of similarities to what he's got in Coral Castle that we see throughout all those ancient megalithic sites around the world. And again, emphasis on the astronomical alignments. So let's get into this tech
prerequisite for them, really.
It's got to be. There's something about there's similarities. We got the land. There's something very specific about the land that they're building on, the type of rock they're building with, and
the geolocation.
The geolocation and the astronomical alignments. Like, are they facing? They have to face specific ways astronomically and planetarily in terms of east, west, north, south, and equinoxes, all that kind of stuff.
I wonder, we talk about astrology and things like that, and you hear people talk about your sign and, oh, if you're born on this date, then you're kind of predestined to be this type of person. Oh, this is your moon sign when you were born. Well, that has to do with like your emotions. I wonder if, these spots on the earth built at certain times or just in the way that they face these stars and these planets, I wonder if that all has something to do with it. And when you really think of it, you can think of it in a closed circuit system, whereas the earth is the only thing that matters. And of course, that has nothing to do with it. Those planets are so far away. But then you think of the massive energy of these planets and these suns and all this, the fabric of the universe. And really, it only seems far away to us. It's actually probably pretty close in the grand scheme of the universe. So of course, it has something to do with us. In my mind, I'm like, it's not far-fetched to think that planets and the alignments of planets and solstices and everything like that has more to do with our understanding of our terrestrial existence. It's more connected to our exoplanetary existence as well. So
Plus,
all right,
everything in quantum physics is connected. Quantum entanglement shows that everything is already, so distance almost doesn't even matter in a sense. And in a really basic sense, planets all throughout our solar system have a gravitational effect on our planet. The further away they are from us versus the closer, there is a gravitational difference. And that, of course, affects us in ways that we just don't still understand. Gravity can pull and move the blood in our bodies. It can do all these things. So of course it has a very basic physiological effect as well. But let's get into Michael Tellinger. Like you said, This is a really cool lecture. We're just going to watch about 10 minutes of this and then wrap up the show with that, folks. So without further ado, let's bring in Mr. Tellinger, who I was lucky enough to spend 2 weeks with in South Africa. I'm going to have him on the show at some point soon and highly recommend checking him out. He's a lot of interesting stuff. Anyway, let's get into it.
Spun. This is some of the most beautiful new work, being able to actually see what a magnetic field looks like through the ferro lens. This is quite a new discovery, only about 10 years old. Now we can actually see what magnetic fields look like. This is when you look at a torus. This is what a torus magnetic field looks like. You can see the magnetic fields. Some people would call this the ley lines on the surface of the earth. You can actually see the magnetic fields. So I'm suggesting that people that are reading ley lines are actually picking up the magnetic fields that crisscross the toroidal field of our planet. And the ancients knew this. They put all the ancient sites on all these magnetic lines because their ancient structures were actually driven by these magnetic lines and these toroidal field, these magnetic lines. You know what I mean? When you look at the cone-shaped magnetic field under a ferrocell, look at this. When you take a ferrocell and you put it over a speaker, like a speaker magnet, look what it does. These beautiful cone shapes that face the middle, just like what? Just like this guy's wristwatch. Can you start seeing why I'm suggesting that these guys were using technology? It was in their wristwatches, they had the cones, all to do with magneticism and sound. We just never saw it like that until we got the ferrocell given to us. And when you bring a magnet towards a ferrofluid, what does the ferrofluid do? It forms beautiful cones and just stick right out the ferrofluid. And this stuff just gets better and better. And now you start seeing how sound and magneticism plays a role in nature, in structuring the flowers and the shapes of trees, and everything around us is driven by sound and the magnetic fields that actually create the shapes around us. Are you guys getting excited yet about how this stuff works and what we've been missing? So this brings me to the ancient tools and artifacts and the torus stones and the cone-shaped tools. Now suddenly you have a very different take on when I get excited about the cone-shaped tools and why Ed Leedskalnin, when I was told that he was seen levitating the giant rocks with these cone-shaped tools as ice cream cones, I got extremely excited because I understood what it means. And I've been picking up these cone-shaped tools everywhere. And suddenly you realize that they play a very important role in all of human history. This is from an iron mine in England. These are cones in Egypt. They were completely ignored until I found them. Cones in Australia, Mayan deity holding 2 cones, just like Leedskalnin was apparently seen. These cone-shaped hats that are found in some tribes that were used for special ceremonies. Why do wizards have hats as cones? And why are wizards' wands cone-shaped? And this gets really exciting. Dragonflies. We think of birds flying and bees. You may be aware of the fact that it's actually a scientific impossibility for bees or bumblebees to fly because their wings they can't carry that body weight. So this has been a mystery. So I'm going to bust that mystery for you, because dragonflies, just like bees and bumblebees and other insects or bugs like that, have actually hollow tubes in their wings. Those are not veins filled with blood. Those are hollow tubes that do what? They resonate. When the dragonflies buzz their wings, they don't flap them, they just bzzz, they vibrate. It sends vibrations through their wings and through those hollow tubes, and at the bottom of those hollow tubes they got thousands of tiny cones that stick out, that send out these sound waves or Caesar beams, we're going to get to that create magnetic fields around them, and this is why they can buzz around. Viktor Grebennikov became famous I think it was in the 50s, when he studied the bugs, the wings of bugs and bees, and he was fascinated by it, and then he built what became a very famous levitation platform, and he was seen and flying this thing faster than the speed of sound on one of those. Right? And people think this is crazy. And what was it made of? It was made of bugs' wings. So when you tell people, oh, he built this out of bugs' wings, people go, what kind of nonsense is that? You're a bunch of idiots if you believe that. Well, show you, he understood how these bugs' wings worked and how they actually functioned. And that's why he could build such a device, because he thought out of the box. And this is to show you some experiments how these bugs' wings actually have levitation capacity. This is mind-blowing.
Today we're going to try to get one of these shells to hover over the other one. The original of this video is what inspired me to do this series.
These are bugs' wings, just so you know, that he's now levitating on top of one another for the listening audience. It's on a table surface.
Nature is fabulous. So there you have an idea how Viktor Grebennikov built his little levitation device out of bugs' wings, because he figured out how these things work. And then we get to the cone-shaped tools in the Rosicrucian Museum. Somebody emailed me today, saying, hey, he went and he saw these cones in the Rosicrucian Museum in San Jose, and they're really there. So he was surprised that I wasn't making it up. He said, I blew his mind. And yeah, and they are written, can you see cuneiform texts that actually commemorate the building of the temples in Sumer, and one of them specifically refers to the temple of Inanna. So somehow they were used, just like Leedskalnin was levitating the giant rocks of Coral Castle, they were using these to levitate those giant stones of the temples of Sumer into place. And here is our friend Leedskalnin, Coral Castle. And he levitated those giant blocks. I think the biggest stone there weighs 30 tons, or maybe even more. And I called it the ice cream cone phenomenon, because that's what he was described. It was said that he moved them with ice cream cones in his hands. And to an uninitiated person, that would sound ridiculous. But now you all know why that is so important. It's a spectacular place. I've never been there, but I've seen lots of videos of it, and I can't wait to go. And then we get to our...
Okay, so then we get into basically the toroidal stones and all that stuff. I'm going to get into that with Michael when I have him on the show. But there you go, folks. That's the episode today. Coral Castle, the mysteries of Coral Castle. How in the hell did Ed Leedskalnin build this thing? How did he cut these stones? How did he move them? We've thrown a lot of theories at you guys, and we'd love to hear in the comments what you think of all of this, and how does it connect to ancient times, right? This is a beautiful lens into perhaps the lost technology of how all the pyramids and temples were built. And I just think it's really fascinating. So maybe any final thoughts you got, Brandon, on watching all the pretty incredible information coming through there, especially the levitation with the bug wings is just mind blowing.
Yeah, that one, because I didn't hear any sound or anything, which suggests that perhaps they have their own kind of piece about them that can generate levitation. I know through bumblebees and hearing him talk about dragonflies, they talk about how they do think that there's different ways than just literally forcing air underneath a wing that these creatures are obtaining flight.
Yeah.
And they do think there might be more of a vortex situation or anti-gravity situation to it, which is really cool and really fascinating. Coral Castle, amazing, amazing journey with you guys. We loved it so much. However, speaking of comments, let's get into our favorite comments from our last podcast. We did it on Tartaria, which is, I know it's, if you know it, it's very cool. It's very awesome. There's a lot of bold statements with those theories about this lost civilization that used the ether of the world to generate power and had a lot of our builders for our spires and a lot of our Gothic and more Victorian style buildings that we see. And really, I was walking around Toronto and I'm looking at all these old libraries and the old city halls and pictures of Toronto before one of the great fires, and there's a lot more spires and amazing architecture that you don't see anymore, a lot more natural qualities to it, more stone. And I was thinking, wow, what if there was a great builder influence before? And so that was our last podcast. Check it out if you haven't. Drop a like on this one. Do subscribe. And for all of our viewers, we're going to start a new thing where we pop up our favorite comment from the past podcast and give a shout out. So, Chris, you chose someone. I loved how awesome this comment was.
Yeah, it's great. So this is coming from Randy Mackin 477. Thank you, Randy, if that is your name. And it was an interesting comment on the Tartaria episode, like you mentioned, Brandon, where he basically outlines, an alternative theory than any of the ones that we were throwing at you guys. And he says the key is radium. He says that his grandma had a bunch of lamps that would light up the room with no power and no candles. And there's she's supposed to turn them back, and then there's a whole public thing. And then anyway, looks like they were gathered and taken away from people, and then maybe being purchased back by the military. But what I loved about the comment specifically is this radium. So I got to look into that. I haven't looked into it. Thank you, Randy Mackin 477 for pointing this out to us. Like Brandon's been saying, it's all about the comments. This is how we get to learn. They literally can help us funnel into new episodes. Of course, we just love hearing from you guys regardless of what it is. But this gentleman was kind enough to give us some more information. So we appreciate you. And thanks as always for the comments, everybody. We love it. It's the lifeblood of the channel. And essentially, that concludes our episode today. If you want to sign up for the Ancient Mysteries Unearthed membership, either if you just want to support us, which is phenomenal, you can do so with the link below. It's $9.99 a month, 33 cents a day, basically. But if you want to also become part of the member and participate with us, we have a growing research community of like-minded people like yourself, myself, like Brandon, me, and others that are just looking to learn and grow together with this amazing information that we're all coming across. So feel free to join. Subscribe.
We had a meet and greet not too long ago, and it was awesome. We did breakout rooms. I got to meet some people from America, and they had some amazing ideas. Not every one of them aligned with my beliefs, but I think that's I think that's very important to listen and be an active listener and absorb, and that's the way you can create your own values and your own critiques on the world, because ultimately we do this for fun, we do this for entertainment, but it is awe-inspiring to look at these anomalies and the past structures and the mysteries and sometimes monsters too. We like to get into that a little bit. So thanks for your support, guys. Thanks for being curious with us. Thanks for exploring. Do drop a lot of comments, share with your friends, like the podcast. Give us a shout out. We're always friendly, and we want to say hello to you too, because without you guys, we're nothing. So until next time, we'll have something great else in the tank for you. And Chris, thanks so much for all your research and your curiosity. And Coral Castle, what a great topic. So thanks so much, everyone.
Thanks, Brandon. Thanks, everyone. Again, Stay curious, stay kind, and we'll catch you on the next episode.